Good morning. I just want to help you with the directions for how what it is I'm looking for you to do in this Padlet. So after you've read 3.3 and you've gotten Romeo's reaction to the news that he's being banished after having killed Tybalt, there's some things I want you to think about, having seen his reaction in the way it's described, and having seen Juliet's reaction to the same news. I think we can start to draw some comparisons and some contrasts. So, after you've read 3.3, I'm asking you to read the summary first and then work through the scene. There's a Padlet, and I'll put the link up for you on Google Classroom, so it should be under the lesson plan for today. So let me just open a copy of this Padlet here. When you get into the Padlet, there's directions at the top. Now, if you click in the Padlet, and I don't know what it looks like on your end because this is my view of it. Maybe it's different, but if I click in the background, then the directions, they did disappear. Oh no, I guess if I click on the directions. So anyway, hopefully you'll be able to see the directions up top. So what I'm asking you to do is consider Juliet's thoughts at the beginning of 3.2 on the power of love to transform. You answered some questions about that, I think it was last class. So, or not last class, but maybe the one before. So the idea that love can make you something different than you are. And she's thinking about specifically in terms of losing her virginity and how she anticipates that's going to transform her character. But generally, we could think of it in terms of how love transforms a character in this play. So I want you to consider all the moments where our typical expectations of a gender role. So in by that I mean like what we normally would expect the way for a man to behave, the way we would normally expect a woman to behave. So I want to consider all the moments where our expectations, our typical expectations, have been upended, or what we expect is not what happens, where those gender expectations are transformed because of the fact that the characters are overtaken by love. So what I've given you below, with this Padlet may be different than other Padlets you used before. I made a timeline of different moments in the play where I think the gender role is at issue, where we see those expectations upended. And I basically gave you the scene and a description of what happens in that scene that relates to gender roles. I mean, you might find others where gender roles are at issue, and there probably are others that I'm missing. And you could always add that. If you look at the way that this timeline Padlet is organized, there's the things I added, and then there's a plus if you look in between the two spaces where you could add another thing. So if you had another moment in the play where you thought a gender role was being questioned or challenged, a gender expectation, you could add that moment and that would count for your post. But I've given you the ones that off the top of my head I could think of, and they're in order from the beginning of the play to where we are now in the play. So the whole goal of this is to basically track how love changes Romeo and Juliet with regard to their expected gender behaviors. So I'm asking you to look through the timeline, think back on the play, pick at least one of these scenes that I've posted on, and return to that scene, reread some of the lines from the characters, and find the evidence that the character's gender role, what we would expect typically of male or female behavior, is being upended or transformed because of their love. So you can look back on the scene on myshakespeare.com. You can just search by scene there. So like Act 1, Scene 5, you'll be able to click on the menu above. And when you come back to the Padlet, after you've found either a quote or you're going to, you have a couple options here. So let's go through them. You can contribute at least one quote that shows gender nonconformity or an unexpected behavior based on gender. So let's look at an example. Scene 3.1. I wrote here, Romeo's reaction to Mercutio's death, how he blames love for his reaction, and what he decides to do about it. So gender is at issue there, and he has some thoughts in that moment about how love has made him behave with regard to gender expectations. You'd have to go back to 3.1, reread that scene till you find this moment where he's reacting to Mercutio's death, and then you're going to give the quote that deals with gender. And so you would go here, and right now there's 0 comments attached to this post, so you would make a post, a comment on this post. You might contribute analysis of a direct quote. So maybe somebody found a direct quote, they posted it under one of these timeline markers that I put in here, but they really haven't explained how that quote demonstrates an upending of gender expectations. So you could write a post that analyzes how the quote upends gender expectations. Third option would be to, I'm sorry, this is not the third option, but rather, in addition to either posting a quote or posting some analysis of a quote, you're going to look at least one other classmate's posting and either extend or challenge their thinking. So obviously this would have to be a post about that does some analysis of a quote, because if it's a post where there's just a quote, you really can't extend the thinking. You'd be offering the analysis, which is fine. That would satisfy, point number 2. But in order to respond to a classmate's thinking, you have to be looking at a post where the classmate is analyzing a quote, where they're saying what a quote means. So there's a couple ways you could respond. You could extend their thinking, so take the point a little bit further in the same direction, or maybe you would challenge their thinking and say, I don't quite read it that way. I think what you say is an upending of gender expectations is really just a normal behavior for people in these circumstances. It's not really any major challenge, and you would explain why. You could also respond to a post by making some additional connections. So if you can think of a real world, so an example from your life or from someone that connects to the thinking in the posting, or if there's some other story, film, or television show that you are aware of that deals similarly with the issue, you could extend the thinking along those lines. So you're at a minimum contributing 2 posts to this. One is either a quote from the scene that deals with some aspect of unexpected gender behavior, or you're analyzing a quote that somebody offered that hasn't yet analyzed it. Obviously, if it's already been analyzed and your opinion is merely the same, you're not just going to go on there and say, yes, I also think this. So, one or the other, either a fresh quote or fresh analysis, or, my mistake, and one posting that responds to the analysis that a peer made. So you either extend or challenge or offer additional examples from other stories. And then I guess there's one other option that I didn't outline in the directions there, but if you have another moment in the play where you feel like either Romeo or Juliet is behaving in some way that defies our normal expectations of how a man or a woman would behave, you could add a timeline marker. So you go find where it fits in the play, is it between 3.1 and 3.2? Is it something in 3.1? So maybe you would hit the plus sign there. It'll bring up a box like this, and then you could click in the title and you could type a description of what it is that happened, and that would count as a post. Okay, good luck.